Hola, I'm Jason from YapaTree here, your go-to source for Cuenca expat information. Today I'm joined by one of our rental facilitators, Esteban Mendieta. We're going to discuss something that we find ourselves doing more and more, and that is helping expats find a rental in Cuenca without them physically needing to be here. Yes, we're going to do a deep dive on renting remotely versus in person. Let's go. A big welcome to Esteban. If you've used our rental service, there's a high chance you've already met Esteban. Bienvenido. Thank you very much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Jason.
Awesome. So let's just start off by explaining why we're making this video today.
So at first glance, we've been starting to do more remotely rentals. So we see that there is an opportunity for everyone that is in the United States, for instance, that will need to save more time for them and to ease the process and make a smooth process into finding a new place here in Cuenca.
So it can be a more convenient option for some expats.
For some of them, for sure.
So I definitely wouldn't recommend it for everybody. And we're going to get into that in a little bit of a second. But we have noticed it's a really nice way for some expats to really maximize the time on the exploratory trips.
For sure.
But by doing some of this, research and then doing some of the process, because it is a slightly different process to rent something remotely versus renting someone here. And we're going to get into that as well.
For sure.
So excellent. We are going to tackle the pros and cons of renting remotely, as it certainly is not for everybody or appropriate in all of the circumstances. So let's just start off with the pros, Esteban. What are some of the advantages of renting remotely?
So first, you save a lot of time. As you mentioned, it's not for everyone because we have different tenants that they've been exploring or researching for a couple of months. But there are other expats that just want a place right away. So it saves a lot of time for sure. You can potentially also secure a place that you really like, and it won't be available in, let's say, a month or two. Probably it's gonna go fast out of the market. So that also it's important.
That's a really good point. So the rental market in Cuenca, it does move really quick.
Sure.
And especially the high quality properties that expats tend to be drawn towards. They are in high demand, and so if you're renting remotely, you can potentially snap one of those up, whereas otherwise, chances are you may let it slip.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. And in terms of where people can potentially apply from, I know we're going to go through the process, but do we have a preference? Like, does it matter if someone is from the US or in Canada, or can they be traveling around somewhere? Does it really matter?
No, it doesn't really matter. I mean, we do have our form that they fill out the information, tenants fill out the information. So we just basically need the moving in dates that we need, of course, their preferences, and that's pretty much it. We don't really need much more information in terms of dates. It's just that, and then to, of course, know exactly what they're looking for. And then we do
what we really want is we need to know when you want to take possession of the property, like when you want to move in.
That's the most important.
And generally, we recommend how long before move-in date do we start recommending looking?
So ideally, if you're living here, probably with 2 weeks, it's enough. But usually we recommend a month.
Yeah, a month is generally a good amount of time to not miss out on the properties, but also not pay too much in terms of additional deposits and stuff.
Exactly.
Like that.
And also you have to know that if you rent a place that you're moving in 2 months, most likely you will be paying for that extra month that you're not staying there.
Sure.
So it's also about, money in this scenario.
So renting remote can actually help you under that scenario, save some rent money. So you're not having to basically pay extra just to have it reserved.
Yeah,
for
sure.
you.
I mean, it's with landlords, it's a new scenario as well for them. So
it is definitely new, but have you found that it's a little bit more, I guess, normal or accepted since the pandemic, or how have you just seen the general trend?
So not only because of the pandemic, of course, that's something that helps in this case, but also with all these platforms for short-term rentals, that is not new, for us. now. So people are trusting more and more to rent something remotely. Of course, it's different. You're staying just for a couple of days there,
Sure.
but there is the process already going on.
Obviously, it's a higher risk if
It
you're
is,
signing a
for sure.
12-month lease versus a 2-day
Of
stay
course,
somewhere. Then
definitely. But there is a process,
of course. So it's getting more accepted in general.
Yeah,
which is
in
kind of
general.
nice for us.
Yeah.
I mean, us younger folks, we're kind of digital first anyway. So like we're used to doing all this remote everything. And this is really just an extension of that. And so moving on to some of the cons, like why would you suggest it is not potentially a good way to rent for some people?
All right. So there might be some hidden issues that you're not seeing, and it's hard to perceive when you're not there. Some of them could be the quality of the apartment. Sometimes you can't really tell by only pictures or videos. There are some people that are very picky in this case, so probably this is not the scenario for them. Also, let's talk about noise. Even though when we do our remotely viewings and showings, we do mention the noise, the neighborhood, what you have close by, etc. But it's something that for other people might be noisy.
Noise is a really big one, and it's tough. Even if you're living here and you're physically visiting a property, it's really hard to get the bandwidth of all the noises that you're likely to hear in the property whilst you're visiting it. That's just the reality of visiting a place. You're not going to be visiting it for an entire week and experiencing everything. So it is something that's difficult in the best of times. Adding the remote layer on top of that, it can obviously just make it that little bit more difficult to really know what you're getting yourself in for when it comes to noise. So what the other thing for me that is really hard to do remotely is just get a good feel, not necessarily for the apartment itself, but the neighborhood. Okay. So I know that what we do is with the remote showings that we do focus on the neighborhood as well.
A lot.
But even so, it's still hard, Nothing obviously beats being in person, pounding the pavement, checking out all the different neighborhood shops that you want to visit that make sense for you, as opposed to us directing and doing that.
Yeah, actually, most of our tenants that are being that have rented remotely, they had been here before, so they know usually the neighborhoods, the areas, and that of course helps a lot.
Sure. And one of the other issues that I've noticed with remote rentals, and especially me as the I guess the tenant, the difficult part for me is trust. So sending money, if I'm overseas and I'm sending money into Ecuador, I am not doing that lightly. I'm only doing it with an agent that I really do trust. And so even though we do it, we don't do it in all circumstances, and we're really quite careful when we do it. I know that there's a lot of agents out there that don't practice the same. They're just not as careful as we are, and ultimately they just don't care. And so I would be very, very careful in doing this unless you really know that agent and that agent has a good reputation. Even then, it can be tough.
Sure, and sometimes they don't know how to do it,
Sure.
So yeah, for international transaction, it's not. I mean, we know the process. It's not really difficult, but it takes some time. It takes a few steps to learn. So some agents, they're not, they don't just know it.
See, I mean, to do this, firstly, the agent pretty much needs to speak English, or you need to speak really good Spanish, or else you're just going to have all sorts of communication issues.
Yeah, definitely.
But then on top of that, just the whole fact that the international side of things, like just something basic like accepting payments, for example, that's actually going to be difficult for a lot of local agents here, because Ecuadorian accounts traditionally don't work with PayPal and stuff like that. So it's not super easy just to get money for those transactions.
Yeah. And, and now that we're talking about trust issues, the relationship that you have, or when you meet a landlord, it's important you get the feeling right there if you can trust that person or not.
That's important. Yeah. So I agree. The risk side of things, so not necessarily from you as a tenant point of view, but I guess one of the negatives of doing it this way is that because it's new for agents to do this, it's harder for agents. And it actually puts quite a bit of additional work on agents, and we're kind of forcing them to do something a little bit differently. Yeah. And my experience is that's not necessarily the strong point of a lot of agents. They want to stick to what they know, stick to the standard process, and that's sort of it. Is that how you feel as well?
It takes some work for us, some additional work at the beginning, in the showing and getting all the details, all the information that we will provide. But it also helps us in the next steps of the process. Let's say the closing, for instance, when we are, dealing with contracts and signatures and meetings here and meetings there. So it also helps us, in that regard too. So I think it's okay for us, but yeah, it's some effort, additional effort.
It's something different, right?
It's
a new way of doing it.
It is different.
And not everyone is willing to do that. So not every agent is obviously going to offer this, and I don't think every agent should offer this, because I don't think every agent can actually fulfill.
Yeah, sure. And it's also about skills, I mean, it's not only about taking good pictures, but to get every detail that that is important for them. And
Sure.
the video, the walkthrough that we do in the apartments, the walkthrough of the neighborhood as well. So it's a lot of things.
It's definitely a little riskier in that regard, and so there are some very substantial drawbacks to renting remotely. So let's focus on some of the, I guess, the pros of renting in person. So, for example, physically being able to visit the neighborhoods, that's one. Any other pros that you can think of in terms of doing
Well,
it
the neighborhoods
physically?
is probably, I would say, probably it's the most important thing.
Yeah.
Because it's not only about the neighborhood itself, but what is around the neighborhood. How do you get to the neighborhood? Easy access to the neighborhood. Transport, of course. Now that we have the Tranvia, for instance, it's something important. But also there are some spots where you might find a lot of concerts. That it's not really a day-to-day activity, but sometimes. So for some people, that's something to
like
consider.
our place on the weekends, we have fireworks and all this sort of stuff.
Exactly.
And that's kind of impossible for you to know. I mean, we should have known, to be fair. But if we didn't live in the neighborhood, there's no chance that we would have ever known that. If we didn't visit.
Exactly. And also the personal connection. The personal connection. For some people, it is important. For others, it's not really. But
Yeah, the landlord relationship, though, for me, that's always important. Right? That's a very, and like we've done a lot of moving myself as a tenant here in Ecuador, and invariably the reason that we move, it comes down to the landlord.
Okay.
Some sort of landlord issue, perhaps, or miscommunication, whatever the case may be. But in my experience, having a relationship with the landlord, that can really change the whole just how much you're going to enjoy living in this particular place. And so being able to meet that landlord, there is certainly some value there, I believe.
Yeah, there's a lot of value in meeting them and get the feeling of not only the place, but the whole experience, the atmosphere that you're going to have for the next, at least a year.
And that's just tough to do, even if we do that remotely. So, for example, have a video call with the owner or something like that. There's so many non-verbal cues that tend to be important for us, because the language generally is not 100% aligned. So, for example, if you're trying to have a conversation with a landlord that only speaks Spanish and you don't really speak Spanish, then a lot of what you're picking up is going to be from body language and stuff like that with that conversation with the landlord. So certainly I think a substantial limitation there without really properly knowing the landlord. But in saying that, obviously we still do some of these, but just know that there is a higher risk there. And anything else? Any other, I guess, pros for in-person?
Pros for in person. It's more about the feeling. It's more about knowing that you're making the right decision at the time. Sometimes it could be difficult.
You can kind of trust your gut a little bit more.
Exactly.
Once you've got those sort of visceral experiences around you and you've experienced that.
Yeah, definitely. And sometimes when you're traveling, when you're doing these remotely rentals, usually it's because you want to get, when you fly in, you're just going to get to your place.
Sure.
So it's not that you're coming here for a couple of weeks or a couple of days, because you will do it, in person, the inspection. So you don't want to have surprises.
Sure. And have you liked and subscribed yet? Please do. It really does help us reach more people. And now I do think it's clear that we have a general preference for conducting our rentals in person where possible. But when do we generally find that renting remotely makes the most sense?
So ideally, if we have a good property, let's say if we trust the property,
Yep.
in terms of everything, then
So we don't offer this for every single property, right?
no, definitely not. It's just when we know that it's a good property in all regards,
What
quality.
makes it that good property? Like,
So the quality of the construction
Sure.
is the main thing. The neighborhood that is located,
yep.
and also you get the feeling when you talk to the tenant. You get the feeling if this is the right procedure for them or
Sure.
it's not. If they're insecure, and having a lot of questions, and then you have the feeling that probably it's not for them.
So we basically only offer it for those rentals that we deem as, I guess, low risk. Low risk that the tenant's going to move in and have problems either with the construction, the neighborhood, especially noise, stuff like that,
Yeah.
and the tenant itself. Like, if we feel like the tenant's potentially going to have more questions after they want to move in or something like that, or potentially going to be just a little bit not, if it's not a slam dunk for the tenant,
Yeah.
I think at that point, that's when we take a step back and we really go, you know what? Is this the right thing to do for this particular circumstance?
Yeah, and we do this with the inspections in person. It's not that we do the same. So I would say probably that it all comes to how you feel the tenant. I think it's more about them than the property side, because we anyway do that.
Absolutely. And so, in terms of someone that's coming here, they're on their exploratory trip, and so this is what I've noticed is that someone will contact us and be like, "Hey, YapaTree, hey Jason, I'm going to move to Ecuador in 6 months, 1 year,
Yeah.
whatever the case may be, or I'm thinking about moving. Maybe they're undecided." And so what they will do is they'll come, they'll spend a month here, maybe up to 3 months, checking out Cuenca, maybe checking out other places around Ecuador at the same time. But during that period, that's what's most important for me is they'll make contact with us and say, "Hey, look, we're doing our exploratory trip now. We think Cuenca is right for us, but we're only going to be moving in 6 months' time."
Yes.
And so generally, how would you approach that scenario? Like what is the process, I guess, in terms of moving that person from someone that wants to move to Cuenca to someone that's actually moving along the steps to doing it?
Yeah, so the first thing is that we meet the person. We schedule a meeting with them, so we get the feeling that it's really the place for them. We know that this is a fantastic place. It's a great city, and for as far as we can tell, it's the best city in Ecuador for expats.
Sure.
So if they're already thinking about moving in to Ecuador or South America, we know that they're in the right path, but it's about the meeting that we have, and then we see if it's important.
Sure. So during that meeting, what happens generally?
So generally we try to get their expectations about the city, the quality of the places that we have here, the apartments, and try to see if we do have all of those things in here,
Yeah.
So it's just to get a feeling about what they're expecting,
So,
basically.
yeah, exactly. So do we have suitable properties for you?
Exactly.
Are we likely to come across additional suitable properties that you may be interested in? So
Yeah.
that's really what we're doing when we're meeting. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
So-
and then so once we've met them and we understand what their needs are,
Yeah.
especially in terms of the rentals, and we've decided that, you know what, we're probably a good match. We can probably work together. What happens next?
Well, then what we recommend, of course, we have our exploratory tours that we do,
Sure.
In different neighborhoods, buildings, apartments, so they can get an actual feeling of what the property look
So
like.
that is a paid service, just so you know.
Yeah.
We do these trips and we love doing them, but they're really just to figure out, are these neighborhoods going to be potentials
Yeah.
for you moving forward, either to rent or buy? We do visit real properties, and so you do get an idea of what the market rates are for both of these
Yeah.
things. So that's very important. But in terms of the actual paperwork and legalities, like do we need something from them?
Yeah, definitely. We recommend to get a power of attorney at a notary. So we do all that process, So it's important. So
Sure.
they
So
yeah.
why do we need that? Why is that important?
Well, for us, basically to be able to sign something here and to hold the place,
Sure.
basically that's the main goal of
So the
that.
idea being, we have a power of attorney. At least someone in Cuenca has a power of it. Doesn't need to be us. It can be
Yeah,
us.
it can.
And we would often recommend, or we always recommend actually, that it's a limited power of attorney. So you don't want to give someone a power of attorney over everything, just for these particular property actions
Yeah.
that you want us to, or want someone to conduct on your behalf. And then once we have that power of attorney, that means that you can go back to the US or wherever, and then we or someone else can sign that lease agreement on your behalf. And
Yeah.
why is that important?
Well, at first, I think it's important to mention that we only list properties that we know that are in good neighborhoods, that are not overpriced, and that it has a lot of value, so they can really trust that if we're picking any property, it's something that they will most likely, enjoy.
Absolutely. And so we have the power of attorney, and then the guys, they're in the US, for example, and they say, look, we're going to be coming here in 1 month time.
Okay.
What happens then?
So then we start looking. We provide options. We establish contact again, and then we do the remotely tours that we have. And then based on their decision, then we proceed with getting an agreement, with getting all the paperwork. We send them, drafts of the contract. If they have questions or doubts about it, we discuss that with the landlord and the tenants.
Yeah.
Ideally, we'll be also scheduling a Zoom meeting or any video calling with the landlord and also the apartment itself right there. Sometimes, in the tour, you try to show everything, but sometimes they want to be there with you in the virtual tour. So we just give them a call and then they can ask whatever they want.
Sure. So I definitely do think that this is the safest way to rent remotely, is with the power of attorney, with a notarized contract. But assuming someone isn't comfortable renting remotely, like, what is the next best option? Like, I guess, what is the standard option, I guess?
If they're not comfortable with that, so we always recommend to book a short-term accommodation here in if they already know the Cuenca, and also they book a short-term accommodation for a month, let's say.
Yep.
And then we start looking in person.
So once someone knows that they actually want a long-term rental, one of the other options is just coming here, book 1 month accommodation, or at least book, month-to-month accommodation if possible. It is hard to find in Cuenca. There's obviously, Airbnb. We do short-term rentals as well, but they are pretty scarce if we're being honest. And so it's not necessarily something that's going to be super easy to do. And so that might be another reason to potentially rent remotely. But both options are definitely possible.
Yeah. And the short-term property shouldn't be what you're expecting in your long-term rental.
Absolutely not.
It's just a place to stay there until you find your ideal place. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to find it.
Exactly. And it is obviously very helpful to try and get a short-term rental that's in the same neighborhood as the ones that you're considering, to get a little bit of a feel for the neighborhood, but that's not always possible either.
Yeah.
A lot of short-term rentals tend to be concentrated in certain neighborhoods, because that's where the market is for that.
And usually more in the historical center.
Yeah, absolutely. Same.
So it's it's also important for people that are watching us that Cuenca is not a big city. It's a decent size. It's a small city. You don't really need to be living in each neighborhood to find out if it's the right place for you. It will take probably just 2 or 3 days to walk the neighborhoods into.
I think you can get a really good idea in those 2 or 3 days. Absolutely. So I think that's really helpful, Esteban. Any other tips about renting remotely or anything else you want to add?
No, not really. We do provide a lot of information in the YapaTree website with the articles and all of that. So, there's a lot of valuable information there.
And so if someone does want to get in contact with you, potentially start the process either renting remotely or just renting, normally, I guess we call it, how can they contact you?
Well, through our website, YapaTree.com, we have there our real estate section, so they can contact us and send us a preferences form and send us an email there.
Awesome.
Yeah, sure.
And so I'll provide links to this. You can check out our current listings, both for rentals and sales on the website, or give us your preferences.
Yeah,
and then
sure.
we'll do the searching for you.
Yeah.
So I'm going to provide links to this in the description. Of course, you're always welcome just to email me as well, jason@yapatree.com. And so thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you
today,
for having
Esteban.
me. It's a pleasure.
I think it was very, very helpful. And hopefully, if you're considering renting in Cuenca, you've got a little bit of value on this topic. So a big thank you for watching. If you're in the market, go check out our existing listings, and we'll catch you in the next video. Ciao.
Ciao.